to the show. The experts are here to answer your questions about what's happening in the property market. So give us a call on 1300 30 34 35. Now, another great debate in property is whether you buy brand new properties or old properties. So, Aaron, what are your thoughts here? And you've actually got some numbers to try and balance off the two.
Absolutely. When it comes to owning assets, all investors have limitations, whether it's limitations in the amount of capital that you have or limitations in the amount of cash flow. So what we're trying to do with our investments is to hold as many assets as possible with what we've got, ultimately. And if we look at that graphic with new versus old, what we can see with a $400,000 old property compared to a $400,000 new property, everything else being the same amount of mortgage, the same interest rates, the same rent per week, you can see that the after-tax holding cost of the new property that has depreciation benefits added back into it is actually about 34% cheaper than that of the old property. So what that tells me as an investor is for every old property I own, I could own more new ones, ultimately. And the more assets I own, the more wealth I'll have tomorrow.
Sure. So certainly from the cash flow perspective, then the depreciation of the new ones is obviously a major advantage.
Absolutely.
Wendy, I'm sure wherever there's an advantage, there's a disadvantage. What are your thoughts on new versus old?
I would prefer to go with the new. I take the figures that Aaron has proposed, and I think you look at it from the tenant point of view. Which would the tenant prefer to be in? So would they prefer to be in an old or a new? In terms of buying as an investor, you're going to be finding a tenant better, more interest in a property that has newer facilities, less problems, less repair, and so I think your rental return and your problem tenants are going to be far less in your newer properties.
Sure. Now, sometimes they say the old buildings, they've been standing around for years, they'll always be standing. What's the quality of building work these days? Like when you buy into these new complexes, how often do you guys get problems? And I'll ask you both.
Again, when you do your research, you weed out the poor builders and developers over the good ones. When you get a good developer, when you settle, you have to do a defect report. So you look around and you see the chipped tile and the broken mirror and things like that. That all gets rectified long before it becomes a problem. We haven't had any experience with poor quality, ultimately, over all the years I've been doing it.
Yeah. And Wendy?
Look, I think one of the things that's important is that investors buy good quality product from developers that are going to stand behind their product. With the Investors Club, we do have long-term relationships with our builders who provide the stock, because we don't want members coming back with problems all the time, and it's important to make sure that you're dealing with a company that has a long-term reputation and will come back and fix up any problems. And look, people involved in the construction industry, from time to time there will be things that happen, but you need to know you can get them fixed.
Yeah. Aaron, a lot of people believe that with the new properties, quite often they're sold off the plan.
Yep.
What are some of the risks involved with off the plan that people need to be aware of?
There are a few, but risks are, in respect to the individual. What some people see as risky, other people don't. One of the things with buying off the plan is you don't know what you're buying until it settles. So you have to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to look at some artist impressions and some floor plans, and based upon that you're going to make a decision about whether this is the right property for you. Psychological risk seems to be the biggest issue here, more so than the real risk, ultimately. Having said that, you buy a property today with the intention of settling on it at some point in the future. The market will still move either up or down during that period of time. So if you're in a fortunate position where you bought a property a couple of years ago that is now worth more today, then that's great. But conversely, if you buy a property that is now worth less than it was a few years ago, that can be problematic.
And any thoughts from you at all?
Certainly there are advantages for buying off the plan if the market is moving up. And I suppose on the downside, people need to realise that they may need to have extra funds available. The market will have a view of the property in the long term. It may cost the same to build, but that's not the same as the bank's view in terms of lending. They may have a different view at the end. However, it does have some advantages that people can save up funds for settlement. It does have some advantages of getting in to a market. Developers price their product, so the first lot will be at a lower price, and if you can get in with those first ones, then you can get some price advantages as well.
Yeah, okay. Now, another thing that is always a headache for a lot of people in property is when it comes to selling. And a lot of people that sell property end up regretting it because then they see the prices later on. You brought along with you, Wendy, some of the top reasons that people sell. Do you want to take us through those?
Sure. This is information from ABS that have indicated reasons that people sell. Particularly, people are unfamiliar with how to use the equity in their property to acquire others, and they think they need to sell. So, 30% of people are selling their property simply to buy another one, but not understanding that the buy and sell process, they're losing about 20% of equity, so it takes another couple of years to get back where you are. So that's an education issue. People will believe that they need to sell the property to get the equity to do other things. So again, that's understanding and becoming more professional, and if you've only got the one, generally those skills aren't being developed. Again, we've spoken about managing bad tenants. This is about knowing the regulations, employing professionals to be able to use it. But generally you'll find that people see that property is a problem, when in actual fact it may be that they don't have the skills, or they're not aware of how to develop those skills to hold property.
Yeah, because certainly a lot of people complain about tenants or property managers, and if they actually just go and renovate their property, sort out all the problems, give it to a professional property manager, most of the headaches pretty much disappear, don't they?
And sometimes, it could be like a yes minister situation where we think the best property is one without a tenant. But if we're an investor, we want a tenant, and the tenant moves in and the tenant opens and closes and turns on things, and they deteriorate. And in the scheme of things, the cost to repair a light or a switch, $50, might seem expensive, but if that property is growing a couple of $1,000 a year, $50 is insignificant.
And so again, just as you said before, you can use the equity to actually live off, you can actually use that equity to actually look after the property. So it's not coming out of your wages, it's actually coming out of the property.
And to borrow that money to make those improvements is tax deductible, so it makes sense to be able to keep the property in good repair. If you don't have those funds out of your own pocket, you can take them out of the property.
Now, Aaron, just a couple of minutes left on the show. Do you want to tell us quickly about your views on buying property within super, and what are some of the pros and cons?
For the right client, it's a great idea. Late 2007, changes came through the industry which allow people to borrow money through their super. They don't technically borrow it through their super fund, but you use superannuation money to borrow money to buy property. Some of the benefits are the cash flow of that property is retained within the super fund. So you may be in a position where outside of super you can't actually afford to hold an investment property, but by wrapping it up inside of super, you find that the super fund pays for it, and therefore you can hold an investment property. One of the great things about it, though, is it applies a little bit of leverage to your super fund. You need about a 30% deposit to buy the property, and if you extrapolate that over into the future, you can find that this super fund has now worked a lot harder for you compared to investing your money via a balanced investment scheme.
Sure. So certainly more and more people talking about it these days.
Absolutely.
Yep. Wendy, last minute, any last tips for the viewers out there thinking about building a portfolio?
Well, I think people should take a long-term approach, see that the problems in the short term pale into insignificance in the long term, get support, get it beside a group who can help you and support you when problems will arise. No one buys a car and expects it not to have a problem, so there will be problems, know how to handle them.
And Aaron, last tip from you?
Don't listen to the press too much about the market. There's always a property out there that's a good opportunity to buy. There's many, many markets across the country. They all behave differently at different times, and just because one person believes something's overpriced, there will be an opportunity somewhere else.
And so ultimately people really need to get out on the street and actually feel it and touch it, or at least have the advisors that are investing in property themselves.
Absolutely.
Yep. Aaron Greaves from Omni Wealth and Wendy Priestley from the Investors Club, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for you at home for joining us, and for those that are running in with their questions.